to be looking at FUTA. So FUTA stands for what? Anybody remember? Federal Unemployment Tax Act. Anybody remember roughly what era that was? No, I think it was passed during, as part of the New Deal, so in the 30s. It was part of the whole FICA and workers' comp and child labor laws and all that kind of era of the first time that we really saw employment law. So it's really a small tax. Anybody remember what percentage it is? 0.6%. So we're going to be looking at the taxes under FUTA. We're going to look at taxable wages. We're going to calculate the tax. And then the last, or the number 4, is talking about state unemployment, which is SUTA. We're going to take a macro look at it in this chapter, but we're really going to dive into like Montana's state SUTA law. When we get the Montana portion of the class. Number 5, we're going to complete the report. Again, for FUTA, that's a 940. Yeah, so that's that. Federal Unemployment Tax Act, it was passed as part of the Social Security Act. It's an employer-only tax. And it's kind of a weird tax. This is the kind of stuff that makes people crazy about taxes. It's not a tax that actually provides a service or whose revenue provides a service to anybody. It's a tax that you pay for a bureaucracy to administer another tax, right? So they sort of oversee SUTA. So, and I know it sounds goofy, but so SUTA, it's different in all 50 states, but there has to be some agency to make sure that they're not just trying to skate by, that they're really complying with the spirit and like have some due diligence over state unemployment tax. So that's what FUTA does. SUTA is where you actually get your unemployment benefits, right? They're the agency. And in Montana, it's the Unemployment Insurance Division. Unemployment Insurance Division administers SUTA. Okay? UID, the Unemployment Insurance Division. And that's not the same division that administers SIT. So those are our 2 Montana taxes, right? SIT and SUTA. SIT is what? Employer. SIT, state income tax. Is that withheld, or is that something I pay as your employer? Yeah, I withhold it from your checks, the withholding tax. Right? Remember, we've run it on the paychecks? SUTA, on the other hand, is solely what? Employer. In some states, there's a little of each. And you guys are working on that continuing payroll problem, which has a good segue. Is everybody up through chapter 4 on that? Let me give you, I should give you a due date on that, huh? That's actually, did I do that already?
No, but I did have a question because I did the book online. I didn't get the fold out thing, so I just
I'm sorry. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, sure, that's fine. Yeah. The question was if you got an ebook, you didn't obviously get the big fold-out form. Can you just do it on Excel? Sure. So yeah, make sure you're caught up with that. That's going to be due on the day that you take the first part of the test. So what is that? I'm sorry, I ended up totally throwing it.
November 8th.
31st, yes, November 8th. Yeah. Okay, so continuing payroll problem due November 8th. So what I was going to say about SUTA is that in Montana, it's an employer-only tax, but in some states, employees contribute to it as well. Not here, but in some states they do. Yes, ma'am. The Unemployment Insurance Division administers SUTA, just like the IRS administers FICA and FIT. Okay, so SUTA is different in each state. The funds are used to pay benefits, so if you become unemployed, you call them and file a claim. They don't really call them, it's all digital, obviously. You file a claim, and they administer a program, and your benefits are going to look really different if you're in Massachusetts versus Montana, right? Okay, so who has to pay into FUTA? An employer's got to pay into FUTA if they have employees in any quarter, any one quarter, right, 3-month chunk, this year or last year with $1,500 or more of wages. So even if you're super, super small, and last year your, Christmas wrapping business went insane and you paid $2,500 of wages, then you still have to do FUTA this year if you have any wages, okay? So it's down to pretty small folks. There's special rules for agricultural employers I'm not going to dive into, but in many situations, just put in the back of your head, if you're dealing with an agricultural employer or a household employer, right, i.e. my household staff, oftentimes there's different rules. And employs everybody, I don't care if they're part-time or full-time or who they are. It does not apply to independent contractors, but we know that, right? Independent contractors are in charge of their own taxes. They're not my employee, so I wouldn't need to pay employment taxes on them. In general, everyone is considered an employee. There are, whenever you see specific inclusions or exclusions, that's based on statutory law, so that means generally a group has lobbied specifically for or against something. So if I'm a traveling salesperson or a driver who distributes food and beverage or laundry, like I'm the Schwann's guy or gal, I'm covered under FUTA. It's a specific inclusion. Specific exclusions, partners and directors. I think we've talked about this before. So if you're a partner in a partnership, are you its employee? You're not. And without getting too deep into entity law, if you're a partner in a partnership, you're not an employee. How about if you own shares in your own S corporation and work for them? Are you going to get a W-2? Are you an employee? You actually are. If you're a sole proprietor, it's just your business. I'm a pet groomer or a dentist, and it's just me. It doesn't have to be just me, but say me and a couple assistants. Am I an employee of my sole proprietorship? Do I get a W-2? No, I just get taxed on the whole net income, don't I? Do you see the difference in those three things? It's a sole proprietor, you're not an employee. You just get taxed on the net income. Partnership, it's the same thing, but you only get taxed on the proportion that you own. So if Gabby and if I own 72% and she owns 28%, at the end of the year, I have 72% of that distributive income gets put on my tax return. Doesn't mean that's the cash I got, it just means that's what I'm taxed on. Whereas with an S corp, they pay me wages, they run it through payroll, they pay payroll taxes, they cut a W-2, so it's handled very differently. Okay, foreign students, you can read all these. Independent contractors, full-time life insurance. Down at the bottom, kids under 21 that work for their folks. If their folks have a sole proprietorship or an LLC, don't have to pay food on them. So there's just a list of specific exceptions that you should be aware of. So basically, who's covered under SUTA? The general rule is if they're covered under FUTA, they're also covered under SUTA. The bottom big bullet is really talking about what we've been talking about all along about independent contractors. That if there's a confusion whether or not somebody should be paying SUTA on a person working for them, here's the 3 questions. Is the worker free from control and direction? Is the work performed outside the usual course of business? Or are they customarily engaged in an IC trade? So basically they're going after that same thing. Do you remember the 3 categories we talked about way back like week 2 or 3 that makes somebody independent? If they have, right, and that comes under a big category of what? Yep, all those things comes under a big category of behavioral control, right? Or financial control, right? Like if you have to come prepared to the work site with investment and lots of expensive equipment and tools and software, you're probably independent. And then the last one was perceived relationship. So those are those three big categories. That's really what this ABC is, essentially. It's just called ABC. Okay, what's going on here now? Oh. Okay. So again, it gets a little complicated, and this is, I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this because this actually happens quite a bit in Montana. Well, not pretty much everywhere. So I have a business. It's in more than one state, and my employees either move between states, or I'm an Idaho-based organization with significant presence in Montana. Who do I pay my SUTA to? How do my employees know where to go to get covered if they're let go? So, so basically the question is, where do I pay SUTA? So to decide, you have to go down this list and apply these questions or decisions in descending order. So the first thing is, and I'll give an example, I have or had a client that was a log liner, and he ran trucks down in the Frank Church area. Well, that's the wilderness, but in the woods around there, and then also like in Sula and Victor and Darby and down in that area. So, so where was the work localized? Well, you couldn't answer that one because he had log liners in both states. Okay, so the first one wasn't helpful. Second one, where is the operational base located? Where's the business records maintained, and where's the office? Well, that wasn't really very helpful either because he had a business headquarters in Salmon, and then he had one down in Sula. He bid out of both offices. He had records in both offices. He had bookkeepers and dispatchers in both offices, so that wasn't very helpful. The next one, where are the operations directed? And that actually where I was able to make the differentiation. He ran, the whole entity itself was directed out of his home office here in Missoula. So they could say, okay, it's Montana. We have to pay SUTA taxes to Montana. And then the last thing, if you can't decide as employees' residence, what ends up happening is sometimes you have to pay SUTA to more than one state. And that can really be a nightmare because then you need to know the rules, the deposit rules, the filings, the reportings, the da-da-da-da-da in more than one state. So you can set it all up on QuickBooks, and they pull from the tax tables from each state, but you also, for obvious reasons, have to be conversant sort of on your own. So multi-state is really a challenge. If you can't get an answer from what I just went over, right, where is it localized, where the record's kept, etc. If you literally can't get an answer because, say, like lots of people actually have pretty mobile residences. They may live in a trailer that they haul with them from work site to work site. So it can get tricky. It's not always as clean cut as you might imagine. So if you can't get an answer from that prior slide, companies or states may enter into something called an interstate reciprocal arrangement, whereby they work with both states, Idaho and Montana, and based upon an analysis, they all decide, Idaho, you're paying your SUTA payments to Idaho. So I'm a guy in Montana that gets let go because, like right now, the price of timber is very depressed on the United States side. Canadian timber is much more attractive for builders. So I would imagine there probably have been some significant layoffs last year in the logging industry. I work in Montana. They're paying SUTA to Idaho. How do I get my unemployment? It's part of this interstate reciprocal arrangement whereby I can apply to Idaho to get my unemployment benefits. Yeah, unfortunately, it's pretty complicated. It's supposed to be seamless, But the folks I know that have been through this system, it's not always as easy as one would like. Okay, what's the wage base for FUTA again? Up to how much? 0.6% up to 7,000. Yep. And in Montana, how much is the SUTA wage base? You guys tell me. It changes every year. I think we use 31,000. Can you look it up on your little employee tax base in Moodle, or if you printed it? I could do the same, but for SUTA, yeah. 33 or 32? 32. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I Googled the 2019.
Okay, but we're using, see, that's the problem, we're using 2018 rates. So that just makes you, so this is what we're looking at, right? This tax table that we did the first week, it's on Moodle. So even though these rates are a year old, yeah, that's what's tricky about this class is we're always kind of a year behind. Okay, so, but that's not the same. Every state, lots of states are very, very, very different. The second bullet basically says it's based on wages paid rather than wages payable. What the heck does that mean for you accountants? Or non-accountants? Very good. So that's exactly what it is, accrued wages. So it's the end of the year. I paid everybody on December 27th, and then you worked 4 more days for me, but I'm not paying your wages until January 5th. I don't have to include those last 4 days because that's wages payable. I haven't actually cut checks for them. And on pages 512 and 513, and you'll do this for your homework, which by the way is due on Wednesday, but not the 940s, just everything but the 940s is due on Wednesday, because we're going to do those on Wednesday. So it's different for each state. You'll have a couple questions that ask you to look at the table. It's pretty easy. What's the wage cap? What's the rate differential? And how much are the benefits? Wages are everything, nothing new here. All your bonuses, fair market value of non-cash stuff, right? Like your stock options and your tips and all those good things are all included for FUTA and SUTA. If you have any sort of a job, obviously you're going to hit the FUTA cap pretty quickly. It's only $7,000. Okay, what if an employee has more than one employer? So I go to work at the Pearl as a server, and I work there for January through May, and then I go work at Thomas Marbar for the next 7 months. Do both of my employers have to pay into FUTA and pay into SUTA on my behalf? Sure, because how would they even talk to each other, right? But what if I worked for a company and transferred with them? So I work in Indiana for Oracle, and I transfer from Indiana to Georgia with Oracle. Do they have to start counting my wages all over again in Georgia? They do for SUTA. They do for SUTA because I'm in a different state. Right. But for FUTA, it's cumulative. Does that make sense? Because that's a federal tax, that the wage base moves with you. But for SUTA, the clock starts over each new employer, and even if you're only with one employer in a new state.
So what the capital, same principle for the other federal tax, right?
It is, but they're different. And it doesn't matter if I've already paid into, Alabama's SUTA program. If now you're in Georgia, I can't, as an employee, go back to Alabama and claim.
So if you worked in Montana, you have to reach the 32,000 cap. If you worked in Alabama, you have to reach that cap.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, specifically exempt wages for FUTA, in other words, things that aren't included in the FUTA calc. nothing really interesting here. We've been over this a million times. Educational assistance, meals and lodging, but only if it's for the employer's benefit. Really, all these chapters kind of reiterate the same things. What's included, what's exempt, how do we figure out the tax, how do we make the deposits, and how do we do the reporting? It's really the same 4 issues over and over. Okay, now this requires some attention. So the first thing that should puzzle you is the very first statement, which says food equals 6.0%. I thought it was 0.6. Okay, that's the difference between the gross and the net. So in FUTA, and I honestly never ever knew this till I started teaching, there's a gross rate minus a SUTA tax credit gives you your net rate. So in the background, like I said, I didn't even know existed, is this gross rate of 6.0%. And then everybody gets a SUTA credit of 5.4%, taking you down to a net. Well, why do we care that all that's going on? For 2 reasons. Your SUTA credit, that 5.4% credit that drops it down to a 0.6, is going to change in 2 situations. One of the situations it would change in is if you're late making your SUTA payments. Then you don't get that nice credit. It starts to go away. If the SUTA credit starts to go away, what happens to your new net FUTA rate? It goes up, right? X minus Y equals Z. If Y goes down, Z goes up, right? So if you make your SUTA payments late, that's going to impact your SUTA tax credit. That's going to impact your net FUTA rate. The second situation that your SUTA tax credit changes is if you're in a Title 12 default state. What the heck's that? So again, here's kind of a pictorial of the algebra we're looking at.
Is this the change that Trump made that's making New York and California mad? People used to be able to claim against their state federal taxes because of state taxes?
No, what that's making people mad is you can only deduct up to $10,000 of income tax on your itemized deductions now. And people that are in high tax states like New York and California are really impacted. Also just happens to be the most liberal states that were hit with the tax law. I can't imagine that was a coincidence. Okay. To get the full 5.4% credit, you must have made your SUTA contributions on a timely basis. If you haven't, then your credit is only limited to 90%. 90% of what? 90% of the 5.4. Okay. Or if you're in the state, okay. So I'm going to tell you what all this is and then you can read it. If you're in a Title 12 default state, your credit goes away a little bit each year. Here's what Title 12 default is. Title 12 is a federal program whereby if you are in a state that basically is gone broke and can't pay its unemployment benefits, they have to borrow money from the feds. I'd never seen this in my whole life until the recession in 2008. And at the peak of the recession, there were like 13 states in Title 12 default. Michigan, Nevada, Florida, Arizona, California, all the states that we heard about that were really struggling. So what they just came and said to the feds were like, we're broke, we can't cut unemployment checks anymore. So the federal government's like, here's $1 billion. And we'll give you 2 years to start paying it back. If you don't, as the state, if you don't start paying back those funds within 2 years, they start to ding you 0.3% on your SUTA credit for all your employers every year. Do you want to ask me questions about that? It's a little bit complicated. Do you want me to say all that again? Okay. Okay, so the way it works when everything's healthy in an economy, say we're in Michigan, and I'm the administrator of the Michigan State Unemployment Fund. You guys are all employers. Every quarter you file a report with me and pay me money, right? It's an employer tax. You pay me SUTA. And I take that SUTA and what do I do with it? What do I do with it? You're employers, you pay me a tax, what do I do with my suit? All that pile of money you pay me. I pay people that claim against the fund, right? So you guys are all employers, you all have a ton of employees, and a couple people get laid off due to lack of work or a narrow set of exceptions, and they come to me and they're like, I want my benefits, so I cut them a check every month. What happens in a recession? All of a sudden, there's not 8 of you, there's 2 of you. Right. There's no money coming into the fund and a ton of people claiming unemployment. It doesn't take very long to become insolvent, meaning you just don't have money to pay the benefits. Except for I'm required by federal law, FUTA requires me to pay you unemployment. But it's like you can't bleed a turnip. So part of what the system's set up to do is I've got to have somewhere to go to get that money to keep the benefits going. Where do I go? Go to the feds. I borrow money called Title 12 money. Now I'm Michigan, and I make the payments to all the people that are unemployed, right? And hopefully the federal government gives me 2 years from the end of the year that I first borrowed the funds to start repaying it. Hopefully my economy's back on track. Well, some of the states that this happened to, their economies did get back on track. And the state was able to start making the payments to the federal government. No big deal. But a lot of them weren't. They weren't back on their feet in 2 years. So every year thereafter, the Fed says, oh, you guys, you owe me a lot of money. So I'm going to decrease the SUTA credit by 0.3% a year. So, like Michigan, that happened to. So, you know, they're rolling along, and this is what their net FUTA tax looks like, right? Then they borrow money in October of 2010. When did they have to start paying it back by? December of 12. The end of the year, 2 years from when they borrowed it. So they borrowed the money in October of 10. It's December 12. They got to start paying the money back. They don't. In that year, the feds are like, we need to start recouping some of this money. So we're going to cut the SUTA tax credit by 0.3% a year. So what just happened to everybody in Michigan's FUTA rate? It went up to 0.9. And then in 2013, they still haven't paid back any money. Now it's 4.8. This never changes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Until they pay back?
Until they pay back their Title 12 funds. I think, I guess like we can look in your book, see if you can find a 940. And then attached to it is like a Schedule A or a Schedule B. It'll tell you on the Schedule A or Schedule B, there'll be one little box on that schedule if they're called a credit reduction state. In other words, they still haven't paid back all of their Title 12 funds. They're still technically in default. I think, in my whole career, it's the only time I've ever seen this. You know, it should be in chapter 5 somewhere, probably in your 520. So let's see if there's any. Okay, so that's the actual 940. So on page 525 is the Schedule A. And it shows you on page 525 who's still in credit reduction state. The little box checked.
Just California?
California. They've still not paid back all their Title 12 funds. So everybody in California still is not paying 0.6. They're probably, I have no idea how much. Does it tell you how much the credit's reduced?
21. Yeah, 0.021.
Oh my, so how many years are they in default?
7.
7. 0.3 times 7 years, right? Holy schmoly. So they've been in default since 2012, which means they borrowed the money in 2010, which makes perfect sense.
So does that have any bearing on how many people get unemployment and for how long?
No, the whole point of the system is to keep the guy or gal that's applying for unemployment with a check coming in every week.
I was just curious, because when I got back from Iraq, it was 2020, and there was no jobs in California at all, anywhere. I was on unemployment for almost 2 years.
Okay, so under Obama, again, the first time I've ever seen this, traditionally you can get unemployment for 6 months.
Right.
First it was bumped up to 12 months, and then it was bumped up to 24 months. So people could get an unemployment check for 24 months. And it was a pretty, so.
It didn't last forever, I know that, because
No, and it's back to 6 months now. Nobody needs to be on unemployment for 2 years now. I mean, most people don't. Okay. So do you understand how that works? So the general consensus, again, the way FUTA works, 6.0 minus 5.4 SUTA tax credit leads you to your net rate, or the rate you really paid, except for in two situations. One of the situations is the default. The second situation is I didn't pay my SUTA on time, so I only get 0.9% or 90% of this credit. Okay, SUTA. SUTA is administered using something called a pooled fund law, and it means it's just like your car insurance works, or your, oh, that's not 100% true. It's how most insurance pools are actuarially based. In other words, everybody pays money in, and then that risk is sort of pooled together. So, do you guys, so with car insurance, that's not completely true, is it? Like you get a good driver discount. Or if you're a 16-year-old boy, you pay really, you probably don't, your parents pay really high premiums, okay? Life insurance. If you're 70 and smoke, your life insurance policy is going to be a whole bunch more expensive than if you're 35 and don't. So premiums are adjusted based on situations. Unemployment is an example of a purely pooled fund. In other words, it's the risk is spread. Does that make sense? Yes. Versus, so lots, even in the examples of like the life insurance and the car insurance, there are premium or discounted premiums. There are premium or discounted premiums for the policy assigned based upon where you are in the risk pool. A lot of it's still spread. In unemployment, it's purely pooled. Insurance is a really complicated area.
nothing else, like a portion of the gross earnings over the course of time, and there's a max to there, how much they go out of the
Oh, sure. To each individual person?
Yes.
Oh, sure. But, okay, so that's a great teaching point. So say I just started working for a company. I worked there for a year, 15 months, and they hit hard times and they lay me off. And I'm off for 6 months. Can I collect more in unemployment than they paid in on my behalf?
Well,
So say they paid in $1,500 in taxes on me, and now I sit off work for 6 months and collect $9,000. Can that happen? Sure it can. Sure it can. That's what I'm saying. It's not a, Lisa Swallows had $1,500 paid in, so that's all she can pull out. It's pooled. Okay? It's not a separate account with your name on it.
and I had went off how much you made in the previous year.
It does, but it's not, there's no, you're not limited to pulling out what was paid in on your behalf.
Oh.
Conversely, your employer, the University of Montana has paid unemployment premiums on me for the last 28 years. Am I ever going to get that money back out? No, heck no.
So to go back to that equation, it's the gross minus the.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now I'm on the second bullet. One of the big things people will say, I'm starting, there's 2 new breweries, if you can believe it, being started in Missoula right now. It's going to be our 12th and 13th breweries. One of them's down where Hoagieville used to be across from the soccer fields, and one is right on that triangle at Broadway and Orange. And that's going to be a big, huge rooftop looking over the river.
The same guy that ran the Hoagieville.
Yep, yep.
When is that open?
So pretty, I don't know. I don't even think they broke ground. They've got to demo the building that's on there first, and I don't think that's started.
Oh, nice.
And
Um,
then Perkins is going to be a new townhouse also.
Perkins, where's Perkins?
Oh, Reserve?
Down Reserve, and then one station, gas station, it's right across the street from Walmart.
Oh, I never go to that part of town. Really interesting. Well, that'd be kind of cool because that's it's more of a, big commerce or big box area rather than a, nice. That'll be nice for the people out there.
Yeah, it's going to be owned by the same people who own Montana Club.
Oh, really? Those guys need more money, that's for sure. I worked for them, none of you here are old enough to remember, when they were called the Heidel House back on Brook Street. Really? You remember that? You must have been a little girl.
Yeah, my parents told me stories about it.
Ugh. To wear this little German outfit, this little skirt. Ugh.
You were at St. Pauli for them?
Oh, it was so foul. I look back on it now, you had just had harassment slapped all over you, the kinds of things you had to do and say and wear. And it's like, tips were good, so got me through college. I look back at it, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm so glad that YouTube didn't exist. So how do we get into that? So people's employers will come and be like, well, I'm starting a brewery or I'm starting a law firm. Why are my rates so different? My SUTA rates so different, right? Because there's a big range of SUTA rates. It can be as low as I think I honestly don't know how low it can go, about probably 0.5%, and it can go all the way up to 6.3%. Actually, look on your table. Let's see what the rate is in Montana. On page, where was the one that I talked about the SUTA rates? 5.9, 5.10, there's a table.
I thought I talked about it.
Okay, yeah, see if you can find that. It's got all the states listed, and it's got the range of rates, and it's got the cap. And Montana's got a pretty wide range.
515.
513? What do you see for Montana?
Montana is employer minimum max,
Yeah.
0.13% to 6.3% on the first 30.
Okay, 0.13% to 6.3%. So think about that on the first 30, what's the number again, 32,000? The first 32,000, that's a big disparity, isn't it? That's the difference between $32 and $1,800 on an employee. So obviously, it's very strategically important and financially important for an employer to keep his or her rates down. So the brewer is going to come to me and go oh my God, they're charging me 4% out of the chute. And they're charging you, who's starting a law firm, 1%. That's not fair. Well, there's two things. What the second bullet says, no, I'm on the wrong slide. Experience rating. An experience rating is based on your history. So that doesn't apply to you if you're new. I'll talk about that in a sec. The last one tells you what happens when you're brand new out of the chute, which is you pay a rate that's specific to your industry average. So I'm going to look at all the brewers, and on the average, they pay 3.6%. So when you're filling out your application out of the chute, you're going to pay 3.6%. Now I want to know, okay, so that sucks, but I'm planning on being the most amazing employer. I'm not going to have any turnover. I'm going to have really great benefits and a great work environment. No one's going to have to wear a short little German skirt. It's going to be great. Everyone's going to love me. And I am going to have something called an experience rating. Because people stay with my company, the rating's going to go down. I'm not going to, and I'm going to save money that way, right? So I'm going to really get a payback for my good employment policies. So I'm on the third bullet here. Experience rating is basically based upon whether you're, there's a lot of accounting speaking here, but really the long and the short of it is, are you a positive balance or a negative balance employer? A positive balance employer means you've paid more money into unemployment comp than they've paid out to unemployed people. Okay. Positive balance. Okay. I paid in $45,000 in SUTA last year and I didn't lay off a single person. I'm a positive balance employer, and next year, as required by law, and something called, you guys know what this is? An actuary. Ever heard the term?
Heard it.
Any idea what it is? An actuary is a statistician, somebody that does statistics, and they're the ones, they make, accountants look like they can't add two numbers together. They're the ones that put all the risk and all the mortality rates and all the number crunching and modeling in, and then they determine rates. That's going to keep a fund. When you take tax money in from people, you can't ever build up a big surplus because then really it's y'all's money, right? But at the same point, you can't let it get too low because what if I need to pay you out your benefits? So it's a really statistically challenging thing to keep a balance. Actuaries have PhDs in statistical science. So, and every insurance fund in the world has a bunch of them. So in Montana, I think we have 3 chief actuaries. So the actuary comes down and goes, oh my gosh, you didn't lay anybody off. There's a $45,000 surplus. You pay out $500,000 in wages. We're going to lower your rates based on your experience rating to 3.15% next year. And it's not just a random number, it's a product of all this modeling. Because you're a positive balance employer. Or conversely, you just set up your new brewery, you hired 83 people, you paid in $45,000 to SUTA, and it was a shit show. You laid off tons of people, you didn't have a clue, tons of people claimed against us, and we had to pay out $100,000 in unemployment benefits. Now you're a negative balance employer, and you are going to be really penalized the next year. Your rate's going to jump up to 6.03.
So that's just for people they lay off, right? Not people that quit?
No, just people that claim. And it's not just everyone laid off. They've got to have a claim. They have to have worked for the 5 last quarters. There's a lot to it. We'll study that in the Montana section. Does that make sense? So that's how they keep the fund in balance actuarially. Okay, one more slide and then we're out of here. This is basically just what that says. Low turnover, low rates. So this is the selling point why you want people to have good HR policies and good, just good retention policies and training policies. You want to keep your people happy. You don't want to turn it over. It's going to end up costing you money in the long term. Okay, so Wednesday, do the homework for chapter 5, please, and bring print 2 940s, 940 if you're listening, pages 1 and 2 at irs.gov. Make sure it's a 2018 form. I don't think 2019 is published yet, but.
Are those the ones that just have loaded on Google? You have some 940s on chapter 5.
No, I want you to go to irs.gov to get them. I think these are what we're going to use for practice. No, that's, I don't know if that's even this.
It was on the Google.
Okay, thanks. Have a great Monday. Stay warm.
California.
Well, would you rather be in this or would you rather have 80-mile-an-hour winds?